the times when I was waiting to see if a church would hire me, whatever it was, I'm very bad at it. I just agitate too much rather than depend on the Lord. But I have to remind myself, it's part of the transition. It won't be eternal. Calm down, farm boy.
Welcome to the broadcast. This is Michael Easley in Context, and today I have my big galoot friend on the broadcast, Dr. David Gibson. This is his third book, Travel Required, 90 Days of Worry. 90 Days of Worry?
You should have read it, my friend. It was brilliant.
I did read it. Second one, In My Father's Wake, How an Anxious Boy Learned to Love a Difficult Dad. We have interviewed Dr. Gibson on that book, and you need to both read that book and watch the interview and buy about 5 of those books and give it to your friends that might have had difficult fathers. And the newest book that we're talking about today, among other random things, Treasures Along the Road, Ideas That Change Choices About Faith, Family, and Friends, hot off the Amazon press, anywhere you buy books online. As always, show notes will give you a link to purchase the book. Dr. David Gibson began his sojourn, this is a true place, in Hedog, South Dakota. And I asked you the other day, where is Hedog on the map? Because I couldn't find it.
Hedog is south central South Dakota. It is literally an Indian day school on the reservation. It is not a town. There is no gas station, no grocery store, no hospital, nothing. So it's in the middle of the prairie.
So you were born in nowhere.
It's where I've been ever since, my brother. I live under a rock in Idaho now. So,
but he's visited all 50 states, 43 countries, and all the continents, owing to the fact that he, like his dad, is a vagabond. Dave has been a wheat harvester, a freight dock worker, a professional forester, a Bible college teacher, a pastor in an international ministry. You didn't mention you fought forest fires. Is that part of being a professional forester?
Yeah, I fought forest fire for 4 summers for the Park Service and about 3 years for the state of Montana.
He currently lives in Eagle, Idaho, right outside of Boise, with his wonderful wife, Kathy, of 50 years. They have 3 grown children, 10 grandchildren. Dave invests his time, family, friends, ministry, woodworking, camping, hunting, traveling, writing, removing stumps out of his backyard, building pergolas, building kayaks, riding recumbent bikes, and the daily pursuit of God. Hey, brother. Hey, friend. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me on here. I hope you'll treat me well today.
Well, that's up for grabs right now. Okay, you're a prolific writer, and there's a group of us that, we get to hear you regale us with stories. So obviously the first question for any author is why? What was the motivation to write this particular book?
The motivation was, my friend, that I came to faith when I was 19, and I'm now 72. And in the course of that long, crazy, bouncing around sojourn, I had some people teach me stuff that was ridiculously helpful to me. And I just started out life without no background, very little Bible knowledge, horrible relational style, horrible insecurity, horrible anxiety. I mean, I started in the ditch. And so people taught me stuff along the way that helped me in amazing ways, and deeply grateful for it, and thought, hey, these were so helpful to me, they would probably help other people. And I don't think there's one original idea in this book. I've never had an original idea. I mean, I think.
And if you did, it was because you forgot, right?
Right. I mean, I'm due for an original idea, but I just said, hey, these things help me, and I'm going to try to help other people. And if I knew who taught it to me, I told the reader who taught it to me. In most cases, I didn't have the memory to know who actually taught it to me.
So not only have you not had an original idea, you have a bad memory. Is that what you're saying?
My friend, that's a long list of stuff that I'm bad at. So let's not start on that list.
Well, I think you remembered a whole lot of good stuff here. I mean, gosh, 30 chapters. Okay, I know you probably don't like this question, but pick the hardest one, the hardest lesson learned.
The hardest lesson learned. Well, one of the hard lessons, my friend, was that I got real confused about my identity early on, and I had to fight my way through that whole question, because coming out of insecurity and coming out of feeling like I was not at the cool kids table and I didn't know how to do stuff, and people were, a lot more handsome, a lot smarter, a lot whatever than me. I just had this question of who am I? The issue of identity. And in high school, I tried to be an athlete. I mean, that was the only thing I could land on, because I certainly wasn't going to be a musician or an academic or an actor. So I tried to do that, to say, okay, I'm somebody. Pay attention to me. Let me have at least a seat at the cool kids table. And so I tried to be an athlete. And that's a rough go, Michael, when you're slow and you can't shoot the basketball and you can't remember the plays and stuff.
But you're big. But you're big. You're a great center, right?
Yeah, I am big.
Post.
Yeah, stand in the way, Gibson.
That was me. I was lumbering and tall. I was just the post.
Yeah, and I was a well-meaning one, but not good. So I just had to say, who am I? How am I going to define myself? And I went through a bunch of stuff that was bad stuff. And I wrote about, chapter 2, identity, this whole issue of who am I really? And I had a very interesting experience, Michael, where I was living in Anchorage for about 4 years, went to this men's Bible study on a Friday. They had a speaker there who was a very compelling speaker, very interesting guy. And he had gone down to South America as a business person to start a business. And he went down there and started the business, and it was going okay. And he did some really foolish things security-wise. And he got himself kidnapped, hauled out into the jungle, ransom demanded of his company and his family, and the ransom wasn't paid. And he's in there for weeks in this, hut or wherever they had him. And at one point he tried to break out, and he got about 200 yards before they caught him. And they brought him back. And amazingly, they didn't kill him, and the ransom was never paid. And one day they turned him loose. So he came home to America, he wrote a book, and then he started touring the country, selling this book. Very compelling story, very interesting book. And he came to our businessman's lunch. He told his story, and he said, "Hey, I got my book for sale. I'll autograph it. Come up and buy a copy." The talk ended. 35 guys went forward to buy a copy, and I went out the back door across the parking lot. And as I was going across the lot, I said, "God, if something fantastic ever happens to me, I will not let it define my life. I will always be defined by the day when I was 19, when your Holy Spirit tracked me down in my bedroom by myself in Tucson, Arizona. That's the most fantastic thing that could ever happen to me. And if I ever win the lottery, become president, cure cancer, save a kid from drowning, good. But it's not what defines my life. My life has already been defined by the most fantastic thing that could happen." So I think as believers, we got to say to ourselves, how am I defining myself?
You've had a remarkable ministry career, and I use that word carefully. But I mean, God's used you in some just extraordinary ways and places. And yet, is it the firstborn compliant? Is it the generic Christian man, or even man in America that has father wounds? What is it, in your estimation, that makes us so unsettled, unsure about our identity?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole complex answer to that, my friend. But part of the answer in my life, at least, was, I was never affirmed by my father until I was 57 and he was 82 or something. It's the first time I ever heard him personally affirm me. So I'm launching out with this question of, am I a good person? Am I the typical maleness questions, can I get it done? Or am I just a poser? Do people like me? Do people care
Now,
about
let me
me?
interrupt for a second. When you're going through that, did those thoughts actually occur to you? Am I a poser? Am I a fraud? Am I important?
I think the questions, am I important, did occur to me. Am I valuable? Can I really get it done? I didn't learn the word poser till I was,
Well, I was going to be very impressed if you'd learned it when you.
I learned it when I was 68. I learned when I was 68. Michael,
Me too. I wasn't far behind you.
I was standing in front of the first class I ever taught at Alaska Bible College. I'd been out of seminary for 6 months. I stood up in front of 30 fresh-faced students looking at me like, teach us something great.
Yeah.
This thought literally went through my head. I don't know any more than these kids. What am I doing here? You know, that was the poser feeling in me. And obviously I did know more than them, and I did teach them, and I worked like a dog to help them. But I just had all these insecurities I'm wrestling with, and so trying to say, who am I, you know? And we just go through these, okay, I'm an athlete. That's not working. All right, I'm a clown. Okay, that's not working the greatest. Okay, I'm a winner. I never lose.
I could have told you that one, though. I could have saved you some grief.
Well, see, the blessing of my life is I didn't know Michael at that time. You know?
That is a blessing. Touche.
So,
But, you know, you and I have worked with enough guys in the 40 plus years. I mean, it seems systemic that men's identity. Now, you got the bravado guys. You got guys that are, you know, let's say really good athletically or academically, or they're really handsome or whatever. But even underneath it belies, underneath they're still insecure.
I think every man wrestles with it to some degree, and if you know Christ, it gives you a leg up on dealing with it. You remember, I don't know, Dr. Larry Crabb, the Christian counselor, has passed away now. He had this saying that said, the essence of Christian maleness is to dive into your chaotic world with power and create something good for God. And I thought that was a brilliant definition, because as a Christian man, as any man, you face chaos that needs to be dealt with. And when you're 5 years old, you know, you need to go to a half-day kindergarten without mom. And that feels terrifying, you know? And then when you're 17, you've got to travel for the basketball team, and that feels terrifying. And when you're 28, you got to interview for a job, and that feels terrifying. And it just keeps going on and on all the time. I mean, Michael, you know me well. We talk on the phone habitually and text each other. And I went back to work 2 months ago because the church I am at lost their pastor, and they said, Dave, would you come be interim pastor for 1 year? And so I walk in here the very first day, August 1, and here I am again. Dive into your chaotic world and create something good for God. And by this time, I ought to be a calm, I can do this kind of a person. But I'm walking in saying, here's a staff that's in chaos and hurt and anger, and here's a church that's in a mess, and here's a bunch of unknowns, and here's systems that have to be repaired, and I got to dive into my chaotic world with power and create something good for God. And I'm 72 years old, and I'm still wrestling with it. You know, it lasts from the time you're 5 until you're 99, and so you're still fighting it.
Talk to me about the chapter on self-control. Between stimulus and response, there is a
space. Ellie Weiss, is it, who wrote that? I gave him credit for it. And the idea is that when somebody says something or does something to me, it feels like there is no time. I've just got to get back. Someone walks in and says, that was the dumbest sermon I ever heard. I am not required to respond in a nanosecond. There's a space. And the space is as big as I want it to be. I can respond now. I can think about it. I can say, let me get back to you. There's a space, and the space is as big as I want it to be. If I don't realize there's a space, if I just respond instantly, I am going to make a mess out of it. The beauty of the olden days, Michael, when you and I were boys, when there was no email. And if somebody wrote you a nasty letter, there's an automatic space. You got to sit down, get a piece of paper, find a pencil, write, and mail it. There's a natural space. When I get an email today, somebody writing something ugly to me, if I want, I can leave no space. I have got to live with the realization there's a space. The Holy Spirit has to control me in that space. And in that space is when the Holy Spirit can cause me to grow if I leave some space.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll never forget, we were in seminary, and one of my best friends and I, and Chuck Swindoll was speaking, and we wormed our way down front to go, introduce ourselves, whatever it was. And he went on, he was a chatty guy, and he went on and said, thanks for all your great sermons. I steal them. I steal all your illustrations all the time. Ha, 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 ha. And Chuck had that space. He just stared at him. I can still see Chuck not with nothing, and my friend just on his heels going, what did I do? He, in his attempt to be funny. And when I read that, I went, yeah, that was the first thing that popped into my head. But you're right. Social media, texting, email's almost, a long gone art unless you're writing something of length. But texting and, of course, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, all these other mediums, threads, the knee-jerk necessity is almost a neurosis for people. And I'm impressed even with my oldest daughter, who is getting really disciplined about putting the phone down and not letting it clamor and control, because there is a inherent danger. It's not just that we might say the wrong thing, it's just the neuroses, right? It
is neuroses. And, one of the consultants who's helping us with our situation said that we live in a society that is hypersensitized. And we have trained ourselves through whatever means, either media or social media or lack of good parenting or personal immaturity or immediate gratitude, all this stuff. We have trained ourselves to be hypersensitive. And almost any post on social media can just set off countless people, trigger countless people, because hypersensitivity. And it's, as a believer, I've got to fight it in my own self and say, calm down, calm down, farm boy. Think about this for a minute.
You tell me that all the time.
I say to you often, calm down, farm boy.
You do. Calm down.
You're obviously not doing it, but I'm going to keep it up.
Okay. Transitions. Every transition has 3 parts.
Michael, I read this book, I'll say 10 years ago, William Bridges, called just Transitions. Not writing from a Christian perspective, but simply saying, every transition has 3 parts to it, and if you can remember those parts, it makes transitions easier. First part, and let me preface this by saying, I must have shared this model with 40 people in the last 2 years. People who are in trouble, people who've lost stuff, people who lost their job, don't know where they're going. First part, death. Something dies. Your spouse dies, your marriage dies, your job dies, the college you want to be into rejected you. Something that's very important to you goes away. You had no choice about it. The second phase is always chaos. And that phase is, what am I going to do? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to have enough money? How long is this going to last? And the third phase, and I thought this word was really, really amazing because it's a secular writer. It's not a spiritual person who wrote this, is rebirth. Something comes along that replaces what died. Either, you get remarried, or you find another job, or you get into a different college, whatever it happens, it comes along. And it's been so helpful to me because I am particularly bad at chaos phases. I mean, the times when I was unemployed, the times when I was waiting to see if a church would hire me, whatever it was, I'm very bad at it. I just agitate too much rather than depend on the Lord. But I have to remind myself, it's part of the transition. it won't be eternal. Calm down, farm boy.
My brother taught me something, 30 years ago. He said, and it was along the line of transitioning, you're always leaving a set of known problems for a set of unknown. And, I've repeated that to myself countless times and to other people countless times when they talk about, hey, I've got this opportunity over here, grass is greener. We all know that cliche, but we don't really believe it. And then we get there and go, oh, it's a lot of crabgrass over here too. Right. And there's really no way, I don't care how much homework you do, how much background work you do, when you're transitioning, you're leaving a set of known issues and problems and some known good things you probably don't really focus on, and you're going to a whole batch of unknown problems, and you're going to wake up, in short order going, what have I done?
What did I do? Michael, somebody said to me along those lines, the grass is not greener on the other side of the fence. It's greener where you water it. And in my own situation, I can water it. I can fight the fight. I can dive into the chaos. Now, I'm not saying there's never a time to leave a situation. There are times. But I think we're too prone to say, okay, the grass is greener over there, as opposed to saying, have I really been a person of grit? This concept, Angela Duckworth in the book called Grit, and the idea that, have I just stuck it out and fought through it? And, we just had a bunch of pastors quit our church. And it was a hard situation. I'm not faulting that. But they were primarily very young people. And they didn't have the grit to say, stick it out. Michael, you and I know each other's stories. You know my story in the one past church, and I know your story in one past church. And it was a stinking mess. It was unpleasant. I lost sleep for years. But I didn't run. And developing the grit that says, I'm going to fight this through until it's obvious that I'm an idiot to keep fighting here. I'm not going to cut and run too soon. This book Angela Duckworth wrote, here I'm promoting somebody else's book. I'm supposed to be promoting my own book. She wrote a book, and she did a research that found out who are the most likely people to succeed at West Point. And her conclusion was it wasn't the smartest people, wasn't the people with the most accolades, it wasn't the best athletes, the people with the best endorsements. It was the people with grit. And if you've demonstrated that no matter how bright you are, no matter what senator endorsed you, that you'll stick with something, you're going to do great at West Point. And I think it's true of life.
Well, and, you and I have a lot of father stories that are very similar. And my dad was always, by the art it's hard, by the inch is a cinch. If at first you don't succeed, try again. All these broken records. But he was right. That, keep showing up, keep going to work, keep doing the next thing, keep turning the papers in. You will get to the other side. And that tenacity is, I wouldn't say it's lost, but it's perhaps not transferred as much. In your and my time frame, there weren't options.
Right. It's not
you
where
got
it needs to be.
Yeah, you got the job you could get, and you worked hard. You went there early, you picked up a broom, you said, what else can I do? And before long, you got a raise and you were managing. It was really that simple. But, okay, I want to talk about your chapter on perspective. At times, everything goes wrong in the process of everything working out.
Well, Michael, there are so many situations in life where we say, okay, everything has possibly gone wrong here that could go wrong. It's a mess, and therefore, I give up or I flee or whatever. But the reality is sometimes really bad stuff happens in the course of me learning something terrific, or in the course of me gaining a skill that's amazing, or in the course of me getting a new opportunity that's really terrific. And I have had a number of times where I had my heart set on something and I'm pressing toward it, and it dies on me. And then something terrific comes along. And, I had a situation where I was teaching at Alaska Bible College. I was ready to move on for a variety of reasons, and I applied to 2 churches to be pastor. One in Missoula, Montana, where I'd met my wife and got married and went to college. One in Idaho Falls, Idaho, where I basically didn't know a soul. And I really had my heart set on the Missoula, Montana one because I knew the people, I knew the church, I knew the town. I loved the area. I had my heart set on it. I fly into town, I preach, I'm a shoo-in because they know me, and because I'm the fair-haired boy, and I had hair back then.
I was gonna ask. You had hair back then.
I knew where I was going. I beat you. So I was a shoo-in, and I preached. And the district superintendent of this church, of this area, of this region, who came to hear me preach, took me into the pastor's office, and he said to me, "You will never be the pastor here because you are not of our denomination."
Okay.
End of the story. End of the story. I'm sitting there pretty shocked because I'm thinking this is all working out.
How old are you? How old are you at that time?
I was 38 years old.
Okay. Okay.
So I got out of seminary at 30, I was 8 years at Alaska Bible College. I'm 38 years old. And what I wanted to work out absolutely died like that. It's a done deal.
Yep.
I go home, started interacting with this church in Idaho Falls, ended up becoming a pastor there. Pastored there for 12 years, met some great people, saw people come to faith like crazy, saw wonderful things happen spiritually. It was as close to the millennial kingdom as you can get in pastoral ministry. It was glorious. And sometimes everything falls apart in the process of stuff working out. Now, I can see it in retrospect, but in prospect, it's not as easy.
Yeah. Yeah. These lessons not almost, we have to go through them. There's no, you and I have talked about there's no growth apart from pain. And the disappointments and the regrets, that you and I both have over this or that, even at age 72, you're really old, even at age 72, there's a callousness there. A callous that you earned, but it can still hurt when we go back and think about those things.
It does, Michael. There are certain things I can think about or talk about that still spark some pain in me, obviously. Yep. But the beautiful thing is, in the generosity of God, not because I'm a great guy, in the generosity of God, I'm past them so that it's not constant pain to me.
Yeah.
And even when something is sort of hooked in me, it's not bitter like it used to be. And Michael, I'm in a pretty challenging church situation right now, and it's so much different than when I was in a real challenging church situation 20 years ago. It's so much different.
Hopefully we're more mature.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not our first rodeo. Hopefully, you don't hold the problem over your heart, you hold it over here. When people stand in line to tell you it was the worst sermon, or they're torqued about this or that, or generally something unrelated to all the above, but you're the one they need to take it out on. And hopefully it's not just getting older, but there's maturity there. This is expected. These folks are hurt. They're God love them. They're sheep. I was talking to someone recently about their particular church, and I said, I don't mean this unkind, but these people are sheep. No, they're not elders. They're not leaders. They're not mature men and women. They're sheep, and they're hurt, and they're scared, and they're underfed, and thirsty, and we're shepherds. And by nature, it's a very thankless, world.
No, it's true, my friend, and you have to look to the Lord for encouragement and support and affirmation. Of course, sometimes you get it in the course of your ministry, sometimes you don't. But my one friend with his saying that says, every successful organization has a non-anxious presence in the key leadership position.
Yep. Amen.
A non-anxious presence. And every time, if the kids are spun up and mom and dad spin up, it's lost. If the church is spun up and the senior pastor spuns up, it's lost. You know that. It's not that hard to know, but it's hard to do. And I've known situations where everybody was vibrating, agitated, angry, shouting. And there's one guy just sitting there.
Yeah, nonplussed.
Yeah, exactly. It's essential.
When Cindy and I were in seminary, we attended a church called Trinity Fellowship, and one of the elders was Dr. Alan Hull, and he's a remarkable, godly man. And I did my little internship, where you get involved in a church while you're in seminary and you check some boxes. And I did my internship there, and he was so kind and generous to me, and he told me I should come to the elders meetings. Well, I'm 20. Gosh, I don't know, 6 maybe. I don't know, a rutabaga from a tomato. And I'm sitting in these elder meetings, and my eyes are like this, going, this is what elders talk about, And he was that non-anxious guy every time in the room. And he'd go around and ask, there was a problem. There was a family, alcoholism and, neglected children or whatever. And they're talking about it and praying. And he'd ask elders different things and he'd go, Michael, what do you think? And I'm going, me having nothing to say said something, right?
It's always a bad place to be. And
goodness. And every time I said something, oh gosh, it was handed back to me on a platter. It was so embarrassing. And he'd go, well, that was interesting. And then, and then he would say something at the end of this quote discussion. And I always felt like, I think I did later on, saying, Alan, why didn't you just say that in the beginning? Why did you ask us our opinion when you had the answer all along?
And, why didn't you give us the time?
Yeah, but it was his and it was also, he was doing so many things. He was facilitating. He was, you have to get people's issues out. You have to let, what does Drucker say? Most people that complain are really saying, why didn't you consult me before you made a decision? All these principles that we know too well. But he was a master at it. And I used to and he had this sort of wicked smile about him. It would just go around the room, and then he would just say something like, huh.
Michael, you remember the commercials years ago about E.F. Hutton?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. And they were extremely creative. Well, we had a guy in our elder board in Idaho Falls that I came to call E.F. Hutton. He didn't speak that much, but when he did, you wanted to listen.
Everybody paid attention. Yep.
Yeah, because it was going to be good.
All right, fellowship. Talk about they will know you are my followers by your love for one another. It's a worn out word, David.
Fellowship or love?
Fellowship. Everything's fellowship.
Yeah.
What's it mean?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I know, my friend.
Okay, next question.
Here's what I do know. Here's what I do know. 2 most important things in relationship. Be gracious and be truthful. Proverbs 3 and 4. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Let them be as frontals on your forehead. Then you will have favor and good success with God and with man. Be gracious and be truthful. And for some reason, we can't get those basics right. If we could get those basics right, I think we'd do a whole lot better in the area of fellowship, relating to one another in a way that we are encouraging, teaching, building up, forgiving, drawing closer to one another. I use a definition in there about love that my friend Ben Boast did, and it's this. I think there's a beautiful definition of the Bible's agape love. Out of great concern for the well-being of another person, to love someone is to know, want, and do what is in their best interest. You have great concern for them. You purpose to know, want, and do what's in their best interest. And, there's a place for emotional love, brotherly love, etc. But this whole concept that I can love you when I'm not very happy with you right now. I can know, want, and do what's in your best interest. And it's a matter of discipline in my heart. It's a matter of obedience in my heart. It's not a matter of you being a lovable person. It's a matter of me being a loving person, because I don't know if you've noticed this, Michael, but a lot of people aren't very lovable, and some people aren't lovable at all, and all of us are not very lovable at times. Now, you're too young to know this maybe, but this is the fact.
Well, in an I mean my culture, this is tectonically different than the way we, just the frame of reference in which we live and minister. It's all about me. It's I, me, my, and to stop that and say, you and I've been married a long time, and to love our wives. I've worked very hard, and I think I can say that in God's kindness and God's empowerment of trying to be a loving husband no matter what, and to learn what communicates love to Cindy and what doesn't. What I think is like a wonderful thing she could care less about, Yeah. But this communicates love, and I think she's done the same. And over time, that's, even though there's a fabric there, we don't have to really stress about it. There's still times you're selfish and you mess it up. And that's just in the home, thinking about people that we interact with that are difficult, that we don't connect with in the body of Christ. The body of Christ is a motley crew.
Yeah, it really is. A couple of examples right here. But Michael, listen.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, I know.
But you're handsome and humble, so everybody has to like you.
I know. I'm trying to be humble about it. But Michael, listen. Let me take it to one specific example, which is at a wedding. And you and I have stood in front of how many countless fresh-faced couples who are getting married?
One or two, yeah.
One or two. And typically, in America in general, when you stand at the altar, you're actually saying, I love you because you're young, you're beautiful, you're thin, you're nice to me, you think like me, you support me, you build me up. I think we'll have a great time together. So I love you.
2 months later.
2 months later, okay. Now, I think what we're supposed to say at the altar is this. I love you because I decided to, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if I could take that approach at the altar until one of us dies 65 years later, I would be in a great place. I love you because I decided to, and you can't do anything about that. I'm going to know, want, and do what's in your best interest. And conversely, if a wife could say, I respect you because I decided to, you will not be universally respectable, but I am going to work at this from my side of it. I've not been a universally respectable husband. I know that's a shock to you, Michael, but I have not. But I think wives need to fight to say, yeah, I'm going to do my level best to do this out of great concern for the well-being of my husband. To respect someone is to search for and verbally affirm the godly aspects of their life. And it puts in a whole new realm where the onus is on me. It's not on the other person.
And in the last, decade, maybe more, I've changed my wedding message to basically talking to the husband. And I read the passage in Ephesians, for Christ so loved the church that he gave himself up for her, and he might sanctify her and so forth. And I stop at that, gave himself up for her. And I did this a few weeks ago to a young couple in D.C. And I said, your job is to die for her, to love her, to put her needs before yours, to nourish her, to cherish her. And I go through this pretty confrontive spiel, knowing he's going to hear 2% of it maybe. And then I talk to the audience, quote unquote, about submission. And I say, this is a vitriolic topic today, but show me a husband who loves his wife like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, and I'll show you a marriage where submission is not an issue. Because if I get up thinking, how do I make Cindy's load lighter? How do I help her with her insecurities, with her fears, with her worries, with whatever? There's very little conflict in our marriage. There's very little, frustration. In fact, there will be a reciprocity where she will go, wow, thank you for that. And that's not why we do it. And it's not always there. But at the same time, there's a back to our last comment, a non-anxious present before the Lord. Hey, in God's power, I'm trying my best to love my wife the way Christ loved his church. Not to blame her, not to castigate her, not to speak ill of her, and not to ridicule her, but to cherish her. And in a way, it's simple.
No, it is simple, Michael. I mean, as I say, these things are easy to understand and difficult to do. You know what I mean?
Hard to apply.
I've changed my wedding sermon over the years. I have one that I do every time now. I don't care if you've heard me do 7 weddings, you're going to hear it again. In the beginning,
no, it's okay because they don't pay attention to us at the wedding.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I was a brand new pastor, I used to give like a 35-minute wedding sermon because I thought I need to say everything the Bible says about marriage.
Yeah.
And I finally realized, number one, the couple can't hear anything. Number two, the people are saying, "Oh, preacher, you're the only thing between me and free cake."
The back door, yeah.
So let's wrap this up. So now I have about a 7-minute message. It's the same 2 points every time. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Wives, respect your husbands. That's my message.
Yep.
If we could get those 2 things right, the other 400 nuances and details might fall into place. Yeah.
The book is called Treasures Along the Road by Dr. Dave from He-Dog, South Dakota, Gibson. And you can pick it up anywhere online. Again, if you need the link, we have all the information in the show notes. My brother and friend, it's always fun to talk to you, and thanks for your new book. And I hope it encourages folks that listen and watch and follow us on inContext.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.